Okay, so with that, on to new motions. We have two new motions this evening, calling on the Ontario and Canadian governments to establish a basic income guarantee. We'll call the vote then on new motion number one. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, so with that, we will move to delegation number 4. So at this point, I will invite Elaine Power to speak to council with respect to new motion number 1 regarding the guaranteed basic income.
Your Worship, Mayor Paterson, City Councillors, distinguished guests, I thank you for this opportunity to speak to this motion. I'd like to open with a memory of the late Hugh Segal, a lifelong proponent of basic income. In 2010, he came to my undergraduate class at Queen's University on the social determinants of health to talk about the importance of addressing poverty through social policy. I watched him walk up and down the aisles of the Biosciences Auditorium, not a note in hand, telling stories that had informed his recently completed report, In from the Margins, a call to action on poverty, housing, and homelessness, yet another Senate report on poverty. During his talk, Hugh described his experience as a junior political staffer under former Premier Bill Davis, when the Toronto Star was reporting stories of elderly women eating dog food because that was the only source of protein they could afford. The story caused an outrage and quickly led to significant increases in the old age security pension and the guaranteed income supplement, a form of basic income. The effect? Poverty rates among seniors dropped off a cliff, from a high of about 45% in the early 1970s to the low single digits within a decade. Canada became known as a global leader in addressing poverty among seniors. A lot has happened on basic income in the 14 years since Hugh addressed my class. A national movement for basic income has grown exponentially. Dozens of municipalities and political leaders have endorsed basic income, along with physicians, social workers, public health practitioners, artists, farmers, and women's organizations, including the National Inquiry on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. But the most notable event was the Ontario Basic Income Pilot, designed by Hugh himself, under the direction of the former Premier, Kathleen Wynne. Launched in 2017, the pilot enrolled 4,000 low-income Ontarians, including 2,000 in Lindsay and another 1,000 in each of Hamilton and Thunder Bay, to assess the individual, household, and community effects of providing an income floor of 75% of the poverty line. If the current Ontario government had allowed the pilot to run, as they promised during the election campaign, we would now have strong scientific data to inform our current discussions. But Premier Ford canceled the pilot a few weeks after he was elected, before any data could be collected. We don't have the data from that rigorous assessment that was planned, but the evidence we do have shows that the pilot improved people's health dramatically. They went to the doctor less frequently. They were able to reduce medications. They ate better, exercised more, volunteered in their communities, and slept through the night without waking in a panic, wondering how they were going to pay their bills. Participants stopped using the food bank. They found better housing. They found higher paying jobs. They started or improved their small businesses. In Lindsay, there is evidence that local businesses benefited from increased economic activity. The Housing Authority reported an unanticipated windfall of $300,000 that they used to improve the housing stock. There are two main objections to basic income. The first is that we can't afford it. Using the pilot as a template, the Parliamentary Budget Office has twice estimated the cost of a basic income to be in the neighborhood of about $85 billion, which is no small change. But the PBO did not calculate the current cost of poverty, the costs of healthcare in the justice system, the foregone taxes. Other estimates suggest that the cost of poverty is in the same ballpark, at least $33 billion in Ontario alone, without even considering the savings by eliminating the current programs. The second objection is that giving people money for nothing, quote unquote, will make them lazy. A mountain of evidence about income transfers in Canada and other countries shows just the opposite, that having an income floor gives people hope, the hope that they need to start improving their lives. A recent study from Vancouver found that giving unconditional cash transfers to people who were unhoused found that it reduced the homelessness rate, and that people spent the money on housing, clothing, food, and transit, not drugs and alcohol.
30 seconds.
This is consistent with other research that shows when people experience less stress, they reduce their self-soothing behaviors and invest in their own and their children's futures. Basic income is no silver bullet, but it's a good start in addressing the multiple forms of instability, insecurity, and inadequacy that are affecting so many of us. In the long run, it will save us money, but more importantly, it will give hope to the poorest among us and provide them with a means to live a life of dignity. I urge you to support the motion.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any questions for the delegation? Yeah, I'll just ask you just to remain with us for a moment. So just a couple of questions. First is Councillor Osanic.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks very much for your delegation, Ms. Power. There's also a living wage, and I just wondered if you can describe the difference between basic income guarantee and a living wage, and who provides that top-up of the salary?
Thank you for that question. So a living wage is meant to be a wage that employers pay that reflect the cost of living in a particular community. So it's paid by the employer. A basic income guarantee in our ideal world would be paid by the federal government. So there wouldn't be any cost to business for a basic income guarantee.
Thank you. Councillor Tozzo.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. So I've noticed in your talk, Hugh Segal was a conservative, and the Wynne government who did the pilot was a Liberal government, and I'm old enough to remember Guy Caron, who was a New Democrat, was also in favor of a basic income. Would you say that there's actually cross-partisan support for basic incomes from different sectors of each political party, and could you talk a bit more about that?
Oh, I don't know if I want to talk about that, but yes, is the short answer. Yes, is the short answer. I mean, Hugh Segal, as an old red Tory, you know, there's not too many like him anymore. But for sure, there's so many good arguments to support basic income. You can find them. You can find proponents across the political spectrum for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so with that, on to new motions. We have two new motions this evening. First, moved by Councillor Osanic, seconded by Councillor Cinanni. Whereas the City of Kingston passed a motion in December 2015 calling on the Ontario and Canadian governments to establish a basic income guarantee, which is an income floor sufficient to eliminate income insecurity and enable everyone to live with dignity regardless of work or relationship status. Whereas a guaranteed basic income goes to those most in need and phases out as income from other sources increases. And whereas studies from the Ontario Basic Income Pilot, which ended abruptly in 2018, demonstrated improvements in the physical and mental health, labor market participation, food security, housing stability, and financial and social well-being of pilot participants. Whereas the Government of Canada's report, Building Understanding, the first report on the National Advisory Council on Poverty from 2020, used 2016 census data to highlight how poverty disproportionately impacts racialized individuals at twice the rate as compared to non-racialized individuals in Canada at 20.6% and 10.6% respectively. And whereas the pandemic, rising cost of living, and surges in food and housing prices have worsened income inequality and created scenarios where more people find it difficult to meet their basic needs, and whereas social assistance recipients are living in extreme poverty and food insecurity are at great risk of developing associated health concerns. And whereas in lieu of a provincial or federal anti-poverty strategy, the City of Kingston has developed programs to decrease the impacts of poverty and income inequality to make it possible for residents to participate in programs that provide a better quality of life, which can positively improve mental and physical well-being. And whereas these programs and services are the result of downloading by the provincial and federal governments by which would be more fully addressed by a basic income guarantee program. And whereas implementing a basic income guarantee program has shown to reduce the need for individuals to apply for multiple support programs in order to maintain a healthy and dignified life. And whereas the late former Senator, the Honourable Hugh Segal, told the Kingston Week Standard that Kingston Council had shown tremendous courage and real leadership when it passed a motion in 2015 supporting the concept of a basic income guarantee. Therefore, be it resolved that the City of Kingston requests that the Government of Canada and the Province of Ontario work collaboratively to establish an income-tested basic income guarantee to combat poverty, income inequality, and economic insecurity within our community. and that a copy of this motion be sent to the Prime Minister of Canada, the Premier of Ontario, the party leaders of all other parties in the federal and provincial governments, the local and area MPs and MPPs, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and the Association of Municipalities of Ontario for further consideration. Okay, Councillor Osanic, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship. The cost of living crisis dominates the news today, whether it be rent increases, food increases, or utilities increases. The Partners in Missions Food Bank in Kingston saw an extra 874 people use its services in 2023, and an extra 2,100 food hampers had to be provided to Kingston families last year. Over 11% of those households were in the workforce, working and receiving employment income, but still had to use the food bank to get by. Providing a basic income guarantee would allow everyone to live in dignity. A basic income guarantee is a way to reduce poverty and inequality. There have been 94 municipalities across Canada that have endorsed a basic income guarantee. In Ontario alone, last year in 2023, Hamilton, Napanee, Niagara Falls, North Bay, Waterloo, Kitchener, Guelph, Belleville, Prince Edward County, Halton Region, they all endorse basic income. The city of Kingston, us, we were actually the first city to endorse basic income in 2015, a motion by Councillor Jeff McLaren at that time. So why are we doing it again tonight? Because we need to keep the momentum up. Because at this very moment, there's a basic income bill, which is called S-233, in the Senate. It is expected that the final vote will take place this spring. The timing is right tonight to have this motion and to continue the momentum to urge the Government of Canada and the provinces of Ontario to work together to make a basic income guarantee happen. The late former Senator Hugh Segal from Kingston said in 2015, when we had passed that initial motion, that Kingston Council had shown tremendous courage and real leadership. I hope we can show that again tonight. Let's keep the momentum going. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Councillor Tozzo?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. Thank you, Councillor Osanic, for the great motion, and Councillor Cinanni for seconding the motion. I've been a big fan of basic income since I first read about it many, many years ago. One thing I really like about basic income is that it meets people where they're at, and it addresses poverty as not a fault of the individual, but a structural problem that exists in our system. And the solution is very simple. People just need money. Like, people aren't poor because there's a moral failing of a person. It's just the fact they don't have enough money to spend. And a simple act of redistribution is a way to deal with entrenched systemic poverty. I always find it fascinating that basic income has support, as I said during the delegations, from Liberals, Conservatives, New Democrats, and Greens. We might be on the cusp of a really good idea if all these parties can agree. It's just unfortunate that we don't yet have that process in place. Whenever I read about basic income, many people think it's expensive. It is expensive. Let's not mince words. It is a very expensive program. But you know what else is expensive? Healthcare. And if you would have told somebody 100 years ago we'd have a universal healthcare system in Canada, they would have thought that was radical. Well, maybe it's about time that this good idea that all these parties seem to agree upon gets actually implemented. And maybe 100 years from now, we will look back and think, why didn't we have this all the time? It's a basic way to deal with a problem across the country. We have shown time and again, guaranteed income supplement reduces elder poverty. Child care income supplements reduces child poverty. Basic income guarantees will reduce poverty in the country and foster more equality. It's expensive, absolutely. It's a redistribution program. It needs to happen at a federal level. This is an idea that's worth supporting. I support this fully, and I hope that this gets implemented in this term of Parliament. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Glenn.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm completely in support of this and have been for some time. I thought I would, just comment on a few things. So the City of Waterloo has beat us to sending a resolution forward to FCM. So we will be considering the Waterloo resolution to support a basic income at our board meetings this Thursday. So it's definitely already on the radar, but any more support that can be provided, of course, is going to be greatly appreciated. When I think about basic income, I think very much about the dignity that it restores. So I happen to have family members who are on ODSP, and it's a very punitive program, and a basic income restores dignity. When you're on social assistance like that, there's a requirement to continue to report and report and report as though your disability does not exist and it will simply go away. So, watching people struggle with that, struggle with housing, struggle with food through no fault of their own is disheartening to say the least, and shameful in a society like ours. To the people who say that we can't afford it, I think one of the things that we don't discuss enough are the long-term financial benefits and gains, because we streamline providing support to people who need it and cut down on administrative costs. And additionally, allowing people the opportunity to participate in our society with being able to obtain the things they need. And I go back to, an old story that I heard told about a gentleman who was in the business of making pillows. And what he said about social distribution of money and about higher taxation rates on rich people was, well, it just makes sense, because guess what? When you've got money, you're going to buy one of my pillows when yours wears out. But if you don't have money and your pillow wears out, you're not going to replace it. You're going to make do. And that's what we're constantly asking people to do when they don't have enough financial means, is to make do. But we'd like to see people do more than just that. We'd like to see them do well. And we'd like to see them participate and, yes, buy a new pillow and be more comfortable and contribute to the economy going around. So I think there's an awful lot of benefits to this, social, economic. We haven't talked about the social determinants of health and how critically important they are. We have exorbitant healthcare costs, and they're only going to continue to climb if we don't find a way to support people being well. And that begins with being able to afford rent. That begins with being able to afford not just food, but good food. And a basic income will do that. So I'm fully in support of this. I'm so glad that Councillor Osanic and Councillor Cinanni brought it again to remind us of how important it is to continue the efforts to create a more equitable society. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cinanni.
Hi, through you. I've always been a big supporter of basic income. In 2014, I submitted to the provincial government a policy piece in support of universal basic income, which they ended up piloting. And I think it's important to look at it that it's not a handout. It's actually like a hand up. So you're raising people to be able to live their lives with more dignity and things. So this would help a lot of people in our community, and it would actually also boost our local economy at the same time, because more people have more money to spend on local things. And like Councillor Glenn mentioned, you could buy a new pillow, or that scenario would happen. So I really hope that you all support this, and thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Boehme.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. I guess one of the comments that I have about this motion, I'm going to support it. I know it's been flying around for a while now, and a person I respected, the late Hugh Segal there was basically a big proponent of this, and I'd had quite a few discussions with him about it. It can work. It can work done properly. It can work if it's indexed to inflation properly, and it's not just, kind of like, here's a number and then that number doesn't change for 10 years, which, not to call it other levels of government, but that is typically sometimes what happens is we'll pick a number and then there's this big fight about how it gets adjusted, and it's not truly a living wage or basic income guarantee if it doesn't actually keep up with the cost of living. So I have some concerns there, not about this motion, but about just implementation over time. The other thing is where I've actually seen and noticed some of the resistance is all the patchwork of bureaucracies that exist right now. I know Councillor Glenn mentioned, some of the requirements to constantly report, and it's kind of like saying, well, I get help because I'm missing my left arm, and then you have to constantly. It's like, well, there's all these forms, and it's like your left arm just didn't come back. So like the fact that you have to consistently say you're missing, a part of your body to get some type of assistance, it's just a name. It's inhuman to just kind of like you're actually causing trauma to that person, to basically force them to relive that and put that down on a form constantly. So it's something where for this to work properly, all those patchwork systems that exist now, which still have huge gaps, but they also have one other thing that is one of the reasons I can be a big proponent of basic income guarantee in some fashion, is because you have to reduce all those bureaucracies that simply just eat up a lot of the funds that ultimately are not getting through what taxpayers are paying to the end user. It's chewed up in the process, and trying to figure out, I'll give you $100,000 and I need you to go find 10 people who really need money. And then by the time those 10 people are identified and you've got, this whole bureaucracy that's working on it, it's like, well, of the 100,000 we had, we've only got 10,000 left to distribute. So each person in need gets $1,000 of this initial system. And that's unfortunately kind of the system that we currently have. So however it works, however this goes, it needs to be simple. It needs to be applied fairly. And what it really needs to do is remove a lot of the red tape, and it needs to remove a lot of the bureaucracy. And I think that's where the biggest battle is going to be, because to be quite honest, a lot of those bureaucracies are going to resist, their own removal in the grand scheme of things. So I'm going to support this motion. I just wanted to raise some of those flags, because done properly, I think you will get that cross-party support. Done poorly, I think it would just create another patchwork system that never fulfills its true purpose, and unfortunately becomes a failing system. But I have a lot of confidence that this can be done properly in the right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Osanic, you have the last word. Is there anything you want to say? Okay, we'll call the vote then on new motion number 1. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried.